I just want to touch upon this family thing. We know that many of these, like Bormann, he had family, Rudolf Hess had family, and many of them were in the dark. But according to some of these Hitler escape researchers, Hitler and Braun had children. At least they had a daughter, maybe even a son. This is the Argentina lead.
Yep.
Now, could this fit with this story somehow? Is it any traces of them having children in Indonesia, or would the children be adults at this point when they went to Indonesia? No, they wouldn't, would they?
They wouldn't.
Not in the 50s, no. So if they had children, they would have to bring them. But there's no story of children, is there?
Actually, there is.
Is it? Wow.
Yeah.
Let's hear.
In the original story that I uncovered in Indonesia, which published, as I say, in the Indonesian language, a kind of pamphlet, there is an insistence that there was a young boy living with them. I then followed that up and found out from the documentation of the Indonesian doctor who visited them in 1960 that yes, indeed, there was a child on the premises there, a small blonde son. And they had a child, at least one, that the doctor noticed that was living there. There is a photograph, and it's a very badly damaged photograph, but it shows the couple with a small child in what looks like an Asian landscape. Really hard to make out. It's an old black and white photograph. But it appears that there was a child involved in this. Now, whether the child went back to Europe or stayed behind, or whether the child was even theirs, there is no hard and fast documentation. But there was a strange story in that Indonesian book that this child had a name, and the name of the child was that of a person who turned out to be a very famous mass murderer in the United States.
Wow.
Who was a very pro-Nazi, a neo-Nazi who was trying to kill members of other races.
Jeez.
He grew a Hitler mustache.
Wow.
He had Mein Kampf with him in the courtroom, and he would speak German instead of speaking English when he was spoken to. He was sort of a vicious, a Nazi. He was not. He was the son of a woman who lived in the United States, according to what we know. I've been trying to find out as much as I can about this guy. He was very famous in Cleveland, which is where he was arrested finally and executed not too long ago, actually a few years before I was even aware of him. He was executed for his crime. He was on death row for, 20, 30 years, something like that, and finally executed. And I've been scouring the records, trying to come up with more information. No one really seems to know much about the childhood of this guy. But according to this story, he was the same person who was eventually arrested for crimes, for mass murder. I think he killed...
But what did he do? Was he one of these famous American crazy white guys who just shoots around himself and kills at random?
He was aiming specifically for black people, for Jewish people. He was looking to exterminate racial enemies, quote unquote.
When did this happen?
Let me refresh my memory. This would have been... he was a young man in the 1960s, as I believe. And the name of the boy was Frank Spisak. He was a notorious killer in the United States in 1982.
Okay.
He killed 3 people. He wounded other people in Cleveland, Ohio.
Wow.
This guy was a neo-Nazi. He wanted to start a race war between blacks, Jews, and whites.
Huh.
He quoted Hitler all the time. He wore Hitler mustache. He was tried in 1983 and eventually was sentenced to death and executed in the year 2011.
Huh.
So we're talking, he was the longest time of any American prisoner on death row.
Wow.
So
why did they give him that special favor? But how old was this guy?
He was born... Spisak was born in 1951, which is kind of the right time for our Indonesian doctor to have seen him in Indonesia in 1960, because he felt the boy was somewhere between 7 and 10 years old.
But why are you connecting him to this boy? It must be more than just Frank.
No. The Indonesian doctor specifically says that the boy was Frank Spisak, or Spivak, who lived with a woman called Gerda, with the man he believes is Hitler and Eva Braun on this island. He said there was a small boy there, and he identified the boy as Frank Spivak. Now, I have a problem with this, because why would he remember the name so specifically? I think he was conflating things myself. I have to leave the door open to that because I think, I mean, roughly the right age, all of this, but I have no data to show that the convicted murderer ever lived in Indonesia. But I don't know. I have no information that he didn't. I mean, there's just simply not enough information about this boy's childhood.
But that's so weird, because from the 50s and onwards, isn't there enough information on all US citizens to know where they're coming from and where they're born and their census and all that?
You'd be surprised. I mean, we have the information as to where he was born. We know Spisak was born in the United States, or at least we have records of a birth record of being born in Cleveland, Ohio, I think, in that time. But we don't know about his childhood. There's pieces of his childhood that are missing from the public record that I haven't been able to find yet. And I've talked to the reporters who worked on the case and who covered his execution, and even they don't have access to the information. I've contacted the prison where he was held, and they don't have it. So it's been kind of around and around in circles on trying to find more information. But I have the feeling this is a case of mistaken identity by the Indonesian doctor, because the boy was arrested, the killer was arrested in 1982 and went to trial in 1983, which was at the same time that the Klaus Barbie revelations were coming out, the Hitler Diaries hoax was coming out, and all the rest of this that convinced the Indonesian doctor to go public with his story. But of one thing there is no doubt. There was a boy living with Georg Anton Poich and his wife Hella Poich on this island in the middle of nowhere. He was a European boy. He was blonde, according to the photograph that I saw. He was wearing short pants and all the rest of it. So it looks as though, was this their child? Was this a child visiting them from somewhere for some reason? I don't know. But there was a child on site in 1960 when he was visited. So,
well, if they did have children, it would probably, and if they cared for their children, it would, and I mean, it's not that long ago, and probably to a certain degree still in Britain, that many put their children away on school. Upper class have done this.
Sure.
And to protect them, they would probably get them away from Eva and Adolf if they had children and they care for them. So it's not that far-fetched, but of course there's no evidence, but it's easy to buy the story, right? Because here we have this hateful, crazy guy who ends up like a mass murderer. Must be Hitler's son.
Well, I mean, and he dressed like Hitler and talked like Hitler. He did everything perfectly, right?
A father complex there.
Yeah.
But also it's kind of suspicious that we don't, I mean, how many stones hasn't been turned regarding, let's say, Charles Manson and other famous, bad guys? Why would this guy be protected and unknown and mysterious? That's a bit suspicious.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Why is the information so hard to get? I think Manson's case, he was a famous case, much more famous than this guy in the 80s, I guess. They caught him relatively quickly. He had killed 3 people. He wounded a few others. He, from our point of view, was obviously insane. He was even a cross-dresser. Seriously. So,
well, many Nazis had that tendency.
Yeah. Well, there you go. So we have a very strange individual, but I guess he wasn't running a cult. He didn't have a whole bunch of followers like Manson. So I guess they figured he's an anomaly, and let's not pay any more attention to him. Not give him the benefit of that kind of attention. And I can understand that, I guess. But I would like to know more about him, though, just for the sake of putting this one story to bed once and for all.
Yeah. That's the duty of a proper researcher.